Lucky here.
Between the early access beta and the pre.
Oh, also, I fixed the chat. Y'all's chat isn't looking so. I don't know. What's the word? It's not looking so fuzzy anymore. It's actually does better. Make an opinion video you can link to when people finally inevitably ask a million times. Yeah, probably will.
Previous media beta, I've played about 50, 60 hours of Diablo 4 at this point in time, and I want to go over what I think are the 8 most important mechanics of Diablo 4 and ARPGs in general, and give my opinion on which game they most closely resemble, Diablo 2 or Diablo 3. In each of the mechanics, itemization, trading, combat, the overall atmosphere of the game and how it feels, skill tree and build power slash character customization. We have bosses we're going to review, the game's overall balance, and the ultimate end game, PvP.
Now, these all 8 of these items are all of his opinion on what's important in a ARPG. So some people have, you know, different, evaluations of an ARPG and what's most important to them. So, hey Ben. Um, so this doesn't determine everything, but um, I think those 8 items are pretty important for the most part, right? So, did he have story, lore stuff? No. So, oops.
All right, so let's start us off with the environment. The environment in Diablo 2 is a very dark and gothic vibe. You'll often see scenes that are horrific, and this is more closely resembled to also Diablo 1. So I
Also,
even use the
another thing is when you compare all 3 games back to back to back like this, and you see what was in Diablo 2. Okay, that's pretty, like, that looks pretty, damning. That's, you know, people put on like these spikes on the walls, like body parts, and just like blood all over the place.
the icon of the butcher from Diablo 1 because I think Diablo 1 really set the tone for Diablo 2.
And
There is a
Dariel's
very
half
dark
are
and
basically
grim
naked.
and despair that is felt when playing through the game. There are some particularly gruesome
An
areas
altar made of
that
bone.
you will encounter in the game, and overall, just much more muted tones, dark colors. On the other hand, Diablo 3 is a much more cartoonish sort of vibe. There are much brighter colors. A lot of people have a comparison to WoW, World of Warcraft, for the Diablo 3 animations, and I'm reserving judgment. I'm not going to say which I think is better, one versus the other. I am traditionally more of a Diablo 2 fan, but I played thousands of hours of both Diablo 2 and Diablo 3.
Now let's take a look at this boss fight and its scene. Okay, we got some cobwebs, we got a candle, we got some urns. We got a crack in the ground. There's no bodies. There's no blood. This just doesn't feel like Diablo. This is why, like, a lot of us don't like Diablo 3.
It's not my place here to say which game I think is better. I am just merely comparing the two, Diablo 3 versus Diablo 2, and how Diablo 4 compares. Diablo 3 cutscenes also had a very different vibe. I don't think that they were
Skulls around the candle.
as
Yeah.
gruesome or as dark as Diablo 2 and previous game Diablo 1 cutscenes. I think one of the cutscenes that sticks most in people's minds is
Real quick, just backing up to
I
the
don't think that they were as
back up to this where it's zoomed out. Oh no, they're holding you down with some kind of chain that just doesn't even exist in the game as a spell. But I mean, is that the closest thing we have to blood here? Off of this guy's wrist or something? I'd be killing myself too, dude, if I were in, this scene. um, bubblegum candy, cane. Yep. Plot rope. Yeah. And so, yeah, I mean, this is the most iconic scene of D3 because this is where you just lost every D2 player.
Uh, I think one of the cutscenes that sticks most in people's minds is the butterfly that kills Deckard Cain. Really a sad moment for Deckard Cain, and Diablo fans mourned his loss there. But just this is just an example to see kind of the differences. Now Diablo 4
Oh,
example to see
sorry, that was just, it wasn't even blood, it's just the effect of the plot rope, right? So,
kind of the
oh man, some bats are coming.
differences.
Wow.
Now, Diablo 4 environment definitely feels more towards the dark and gothic vibes, so more akin to the Diablo 2, Diablo 1 era. The devs have even mentioned that that was the inspiration for this game. They're kind of
I'm surprised you used
taking
this
a
scene.
180 from where the graphics were in
I think
Diablo 3.
the
So for all these
cinematic prior
reasons,
to this was
I
even
think
better.
that the environment
I think the cinematic prior to that one, where you are on laying down on a cart, I guess. It's like a little cart with two wheels, and you get dragged into that butcher room, basically, or that altar or whatever. That was like what reminded me of when you first face the butcher or the Andariel in Diablo 2, right? How it's just crazy, bloody, and just yeah, it's Diablo. You're in hell.
definitely goes into the Diablo 2 bucket. Now let's talk about character itemization. Itemization in Diablo 2 and Diablo 3 may look similar in the sense that you have magic, rares, uniques, set items, and but the way that they operated were really much different. Um, Diablo 2, for instance, magic and rare items in a lot of cases were actually sometimes better than uniques, which was really never the case in Diablo 3. Unique items were much harder to find in Diablo 2 as opposed to Diablo 3,
I don't think
and they would
I don't think rare or especially blue items were ever better in Diablo 3. I don't think there was ever a point where they were better than legendaries. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but I played the very beginning. Uh, I guess maybe if you got like a blue or a rare that actually had damage on the weapon compared to a legendary weapon that didn't have any damage. But like that's because your damage is all based off of your weapon damage. And so if you didn't have any weapon damage on your weapon on a legendary, then it was just garbage because there's no damage. like um yeah.
it would feel so much more rewarding when you did find them because of their rarity.
Okay.
Now in Diablo 3, you start the game
See, he finds a Maris and he finds a 30 all res Maris, all right? Malevolent Dice, thanks to follow. Welcome to the stream.
by getting essentially a free set. And set items and unique items are the only viable items in Diablo 3. Magic, rare, normal items, they really serve no purpose at all. The way
True.
that Diablo 3 works in itemization is that your set and unique items are basically going to be what gives your build all your power. We're going to talk about that when we get to the skill tree and customization a little bit more. In a sense, the rare items really had no purpose in Diablo 3. It was all about sets
Yeah,
and uniques. Now in
true.
Diablo 4, we actually don't even have set items yet. We may get them in a future patch, but as it stands now, rare items and legendary items are really actually very close to one another. So rare items have a significant value, and in a lot of times can actually be and should be in almost all cases better than the legendary items that drop. And that's because you can extract a legendary essence from that legendary item, apply it onto a rare item, and it immediately becomes a legendary item with potentially one more affix than a legendary item could even get. So, in a sense, rare items in Diablo 4 can actually even be better drops than legendary items. And this is very akin to a Diablo 2 style of gameplay. Also, on items, we're getting plus skills in Diablo 4. So, plus skills were completely removed from the game in Diablo 3, and those were something that we saw a lot in Diablo 2. So for that reason and more, I believe that the itemization falls well into the Diablo 2 realm of categories.
They did still take up a lot of the substats that Diablo 3 introduced, like cooldown reduction. Um, and you don't have any cooldown in Diablo 2. You don't really have skills that have cooldowns, which kind of limits, I guess, the amount of skills you could do. But like, there's a lot of passives, for example, in your skill tree. But the entire skill tree felt D3. Uh, I don't know about that, Matt. And here, I'll just let Lucky explain why. But for the most part, where I agree with Lucky is that finding rares does not feel bad in D4, whereas it doesn't even matter in D3. If you find a rare in D3, you just don't care. Like, literally in the latest season, they added something to where, like, your pet will go and pick up an item for you, and then it'll salvage it if it's a blue or a rare. Like, it'll just automatically do that for you. Like, you don't even care that it's, dropping. Um, so yeah, you just care about sets and uniques in D3. There's no concern about rares. Now, D4, there's no concern for blue items, but maybe they could do a little change. Somebody, I remember, suggesting adding like extra sockets to blue items so that you could have a more customizable item, um, which is pretty cool. Like, if you wanted to stack like a bunch of poison resist for Ashara, the world boss, you could do that by having like a three slot socketed, armor or something, and throwing in like a bunch of emeralds, and boom, you have a bunch of poison res now for the world boss, and you have these niche category, like these niche builds with blue items potentially. But yeah, um, so here we're coming up to skill tree right now. I think
Now, for trading, I think trading
trading.
is a fairly simple and straightforward one. In Diablo 2, there was free and open trading, next to no restrictions. Trade any item
Okay,
with any player, no matter what. In Diablo 3, on the other hand, trading was removed entirely from the game. The only way you could even give an item that you found to another player is if you were in the same game with them with a maximum party of 4 and it drops while you are all playing together. You would be able to give that item to your friend. So, the pretty stark
okay,
differences between Diablo
yeah,
2, Diablo 3. For Diablo 4, there is free and open trading for any rare item that drops. And as I said previously, rare items are actually extremely important in Diablo 4 and can be some of the best items that you can find in the game. So I think it's important to note that while there are some trade restrictions in Diablo 4, you can't trade legendary items, you can't trade unique items. Being able to trade rare items, which are gonna be your best in slot items most of the time, is still pretty free and open trade wise to me. And I don't think it's nearly as restrictive as Diablo 3 is, obviously, because you can't trade anything in Diablo 3. So I'm going to put Diablo 4 trading in the Diablo 2 category because I think that
it's kind of in between, right? Like, you can't trade, but like we said, like just a minute ago with the itemization, that the rare items, like you said, I guess in the video too, is that they can be the most powerful item. So being able to trade the most powerful item and then just convert it into the extracted ability that you want doesn't really limit trade that much, except that like once you lock it in with that ability, now it's yours. Um, So I think that's might even be a good thing because then once that's your item, it takes it off the market, which means that item can be found again or that rare, and so that rare will still have a high value because other people will be looking for that item for that build. Um, so that could be a good thing actually, that it does restrict the trade once you put the essence on the rare item. But I don't know. We'll have to see how it plays out uh, in the um, in the late game. So
Overall, the trading of rare items is going to create a nice, robust economy that's going to
hey,
bring the
Geeky.
community together, much akin to a Diablo 2 style trade. Build power and customization. So in Diablo 2, your skills were essentially permanent. You got 3 respecs, but once you put a skill point in, you were pretty much building for your end game build. The gear that you wore was sort of variable around the skills that you put in. The majority of the power that your character got was from the skill points that you placed, and even your stat points in some cases. So it was much more important where your skills were going in Diablo 2. When we compare to Diablo 3, all your power really comes from your gear. So it depends on what you drop early or what the first set bonus is of a specific season. That is going to entirely
Yeah.
dictate the build that you want to play. You no
But
longer really get a choice of what build is best. The gear that
the reason why is because all your damage is based around your weapon damage. So for D2, the barbarian, for example, if he's using a weapon, or the paladin, if you're going zeal or something, those physical damage builds have to have a weapon to do damage. Or the Zon, for example, the Zon really really sucks without a weapon um, in D2, but it's more about for the Zon, it's more about the skill that's used with the weapon, and for the Barb, it really is about the weapon damage. Um, so yeah, it's interesting. Um, I don't know how I feel about weapons being like your only damage. Seems like a lot of games do that now. I don't know if it's just a more casual way of being able to understand like the damage you're doing, because I know when I saw like some people coming back or new players coming to D2R that never played D2, they didn't understand that. They thought like, I mean, obviously they came in with like thinking, oh, my weapons, the Oculus does like 18 to 42 damage. It's garbage. um, but obviously at that point they already understood like the weapon damage didn't matter, but you know, let's just call it item power. Item power is different. We can't be calling stuff that they've already named something else. That would just get confusing. Item power in D4, for example, is the uh, kind of the level. It's determined on the level of mob that drops it, and the level of mob is determined on your level. So
you find kind of decides it for you in Diablo 3. And without gear, you are useless. In Diablo 2, you could beat the entire game with a naked character, no gear at all, with just skill points. That was how it was designed. It's been done by multiple players,
correct,
completely naked. Gear is not required.
correct. It's not required, but it does take a lot longer on certain classes. Like Sork has no problem getting through the game naked. I think I did it in like 12 or 13 hours, all the way through hell. Um, I think Lav did it on hardcore. It took him like 50 hours. And I mean, I think Lav has done every single class on hardcore naked through the entire game. So try a barb without a weapon and have fun. I mean, it's been done. It has been done. Barb has been Barb has been done on a hardcore naked all the way through hell.
You could be a 3,000 level Paragon in Diablo 3 and try to play with no gear, and you won't even be able to kill like a T1 Rift or anything like that. So gear is entirely dependent in Diablo 3. In Diablo 2, it was much more aligned with where you chose your skill points. For Diablo 4, the skill tree is very important.
Okay, hold on. let me go back to that Diablo 2 little thing there. So that was Hell Diablo, right? But when he was in CS earlier with this naked Sork, that was not Hell CS, right? Because none of the dudes were lightning immune. Unless he's got a Sunder Charm
Aligned
on.
with where you chose your skill points. For
But there's no Sunder Charm here. So he must. I don't know if like that's Hell Diablo, right? Because normal Diablo is red, Nightmare Diablo is like a green, and Hell Diablo is like a black, right? So, anyways, sorry. Just little things that bothered me, like that stand out to me here from the D2 content stuff. There's a Torch Naked Ubers? No. Not to forget about Torch and Annie plus Skillers. Yeah, I mean he's got Skillers and Annie. Yeah, yeah. I mean, sure. He's just showing like he has no gear on. Obviously, Skillers are helping boost his damage, and survivability. But like he's pointing out that he has no weapon equipped, right? To like people that think your weapon damages all of your damage, right?
for Diablo 4, the skill tree is very important. And I think almost equally as important as your gear. So, because the fact that your gear is not the only thing dictating what build you play.
Wait, okay. Let's think about this. If you get your basic skill in Diablo 3, you can actually get gear that benefits your basic skill, and there's actually builds around the basic skill, right? I mean that's like Gears of the Dreadlands, I think, for Diablo 3. And oh, I think you use like strafe with it as well, but whatever. Um in Diablo 4, if you I mean Diablo 4 and Diablo 3 are pretty similar in this case, I think, for how they deal damage. But if you don't have your skill points in Diablo 4, do you do damage? I didn't really even try to test that, I guess. I know if you have your skill points in, you do like double your damage in Diablo 4.
And that skill points are a little bit more permanent in Diablo 4. Putting your skill points in Diablo 3 really had no consequences to it. You really never got attached to any specific build. And I think in Diablo 4, you're going to be picking your build at the start of a season. You're going to be speccing into it, and you're going to be finding gear that complements the build that you choose. And that feels very much like Diablo 2 to me as opposed to Diablo 3. So for build power and
I disagree. um, you do a skill build in Diablo 3, you get items that complement, or actually, you get skills that complement your build. Oh, you get items that complement your skill build as well, because you can build whatever you want in Diablo 3 and just get skills that, or I mean, just get items that complement those skills. Although it's a little different, but it's more similar to Diablo 3 than Diablo 2 here. Um, so yeah, I understand that what he's trying to say, but I just disagree. I think it's more closely related to Diablo 3 here.
customization, we're going to put that in the Diablo 2 category. The next category is combat. Now, in Diablo 2, combat feels very slow in a lot of cases. Until you have basically your end game Sork with 200 faster cast rate, you're really not exploding entire screens in Diablo 2. As opposed to Diablo 3, once you get, your first set bonus, pick whatever build the set bonus gives 10,000 damage to, and you could run T1 rifts and T1 maps. You're basically just gonna run through the map. You're gonna explode the entire screen. And it's extremely fast paced. For Diablo 4, it was difficult for me to choose. The combat in Diablo 4 feels slow. This is only based on the beta test, so we've only gotten to level 25. So I expect.
So to compare it to Diablo 3, you would have to go back to the beginning of Diablo 3 prior to getting all the in-game gear and seeing what that compares like to the early game of Diablo 4 to compare it to Diablo 3. You can't be taking an in-game build of Diablo 3 to an in-game build of Diablo 4. Or I mean, sorry, 20 level 25. Not even a quarter of the way through the game, because not only do we not have all the other aspects that we can get later on, the other 4 acts or 5 acts or whatever that we're missing, but also the Paragon boards that'll increase our damage most likely, and uh, I mean just the more like renown and whatnot, and all the other like things that could potentially be there to boost our damage and our cooldown and reduce our cooldowns, so that we're just blinking all over the place. So, well, I won't assume, but it just that's where it looks like it's going. But then that the thing is that the other thing it looked like uh character building here. Like it looked like this was going towards Diablo 3 because you showed a character with no items in Diablo 2 and that your skill build was the only thing that mattered. Well, it mattered more than anything else. And then in Diablo 3, your items matter more than anything else. So in Diablo 4, when your items matter more than anything else than your skill build, although they're about equal, it's kind of like I can't really put it all on one. It's like partial. It's like mostly I think Diablo 3, but a good portion of it still Diablo 2. And so like it's I don't know. You're in this in between where it's taking something from both with the skill build or character build or whatever. But yeah, like I said, I disagree with like putting it in Diablo 2. I think this is more closely to Diablo 3. Sorry, the combat uh, looks like it's going towards Diablo 3, but the way he's worded it so far, it looks like it's going toward Diablo 2. I don't know.
End game optimization, it may be just as fast as Diablo 3.
Okay.
But for right now, it actually does feel very much like Diablo 2 with the speed at which you are clearing monsters and fighting monsters.
Yeah, but this is how
But
Diablo
the
3 plays
combat
too
feels a lot
at
like
the
Diablo
beginning
3. It feels like a lot of skills were
prior
taken
to
from
getting to
Diablo
70.
3. And I don't think that that's, necessarily a bad thing. I think that the combat system in Diablo 3 was actually much more evolved. Combat in
I
Diablo
agree.
4 feels very slow and much more like Diablo 2, but Diablo 4 combat we're going to put in the Diablo 3
Okay, good.
category at the moment. A lot of the skills and a lot of the feel of the characters we've been able to play so far do feel like that they've come from the Diablo 3
Yes.
skill tree, essentially. I could also see that.
That's why a lot of people think Diablo 4 is like Diablo 3 because the skills look like Diablo 3 skills, right? Diablo 4 skills look like Diablo 3 skills. Um, and it's a lot of the like those kind of builds that people are like, oh no, Diablo 4 is Diablo 3.5 because it looks like the skills look like Diablo 3 in Diablo 4. Man, I'm gonna trip over myself. This is why he's probably reading, as you can see, his eyes are probably reading from like a sheet, so he doesn't trip over himself. He's probably got it all written out. Uh, wait, why is that all the way down there? There you go. Brian, thanks for 150 bits. Where's this? Okay. Put this up here. All right. How's it going? Make an outline. Yeah, that's. I mean, that's what it seems like he's going off of. Um. So yeah, I agree with these three, or four actually, and then disagree with this one. I think this is still Diablo 3. Um. Nah, just wing it, dude. Wait, Leash, you're saying both things. Um. Obviously, PvP will go to Diablo 2. I don't think that needs any explanation. Balance will go toward Diablo 3. And what's this one? Bosses. Bosses will go to Diablo 3 as well. So these two will be Diablo 3, and this one will be Diablo 2. And that's these are pretty straightforward, I think. Like Diablo 3, nobody PvPs. The end game is doing rifts and rifts and rifts. I can't think of anything else you do. Rifts. Um, Diablo 2, the end game is kind of like whatever you want to make of it. PvP is mostly what people go into because there isn't really a good end game grind. You can grind to 99, you can do Ubers. I mean, you can magic find. Um, but yeah, I mean, the grind in Diablo 2 is really repetitive. Like you MF and Ariel or Mephisto, or keys, and obviously you can go, yeah, Holy Grail. Thank you. I mean, we've made up things like finding all the items in the game. Holy Grail. Uh, and I mean, not everybody's found everything in Diablo 2 because Diablo 2 just has that high a rarity. Like items are just that rare. Uh, but just because the the only reason that Tyrael's Might feels good to find is because of how rare it is. It doesn't feel good to find it because you're going to incorporate it into any build you're going to use. It just it's like, oh yes, I got Tyrael's Might. It's a 1 in 500,000 chance of ever dropping. So that means that means my perseverance of just grinding the crap out of this zone or these mobs finally paid off. That's kind of like your trophy of that. But it doesn't give you any, satisfaction as far as your build goes, which isn't a good feeling at all. So let's put it in the stash. Yeah, exactly. Because it's a trophy, right? And I guess that's what like standard of heroes were thought to be. I guess, unless they planned on doing some crafting thing with them, but yeah.
The combat becoming pretty fast paced towards the end. A lot of characters have
Now you can
these
finally play the
mobility
game.
skills
Yeah.
that allow them to move faster. And with the introduction to things like cooldowns that we saw in Diablo 3, I think a lot of the combat skills
Yeah.
and
Cooldowns.
the
Diablo 3.
characters you're going to play in Diablo 4 will have some sort of cooldown on their skills. And that really wasn't a thing in Diablo 2. So for combat, we're going to put it in the Diablo 3 category. The
Yep.
next topic we're going to talk about is game balance. In Diablo 2, the game is not very balanced. And this is from years and years of playing the game. Every season, you see people.
Okay, real quick. Let me address this too. Okay, what mod is the most popular in Diablo 2? Project Diablo 2. What is Project Diablo 2 doing? Balancing out the characters. That's like one of the main things they're doing in Project Diablo 2. And it's the most popular mod. So balance is a thing that people want, and D3 and D4 have that more so than D2. So that's actually like a big, or I mean, it's what most people want, I should say. Not all people, but yeah.
Starting Sorceress because it has early access to the skill Teleport, or you see a Hammerden because they do the most damage in the game, and the other skills are kind of left behind. Nobody starts a Barbarian because the combat system is very complicated and really.
Mike, what do you want for the challenge? Off meta build? There's off meta builds in Diablo 4. Did you play a barbarian and never see a sork come up and try to, you know, give you a little hand there?
Really not user friendly in Diablo 2. As opposed to Diablo 3, I think every class in Diablo 3 is pretty viable with one another. And you see every season, you can check the Greater Rift leaderboards and they're all not too far apart. There's never really one class that really stands out, and each season the balancing is different where they'll change a set around
Man, everybody
or
can do
they'll
tier
change a
150.
unique item, and they
Wow.
really maintain
It takes
balance
them a
very
lot
well
longer.
between all the
Wow.
classes in Diablo 3. So far in Diablo 4, it feels very much like Diablo 3 in terms of balance. There isn't this big discrepancy like we saw in Diablo 2 where everyone is playing just one character. Everyone's really enjoying just testing out all the different builds, and everything
Barb
seems
also sucks
fairly
in D3.
viable, and you can make with it
No,
what
it
you want.
doesn't.
So I think for balancing, we're going to
Hold on, hold on, hold on. We're addressing this right now. Barb in Diablo 3. Let's go to max roll and I'll just show you real quick. D3. Let's go to tier lists, solo pushing, and let's take a look. Does the Barb make it up here? Yes, he does. Who doesn't make it up here? On the S tier builds, the Demon Hunter. There's a lot of Demon Hunter builds that are A tier, but they're not S tier. So, there you go. You got Sork probably on top. I've heard Necro's really good, but I've never purchased the Necro expansion. Don't really play the Witch Doctor or the Monk. So Barb is actually a lot of fun in D3 and is not underpowered. And in D4, if you remember who I rated Rob, who was playing a Barb in D4, and he was critting for 16 and 20k on like a normal crit, and then he could like do a super crit for like 40 or 50k or something. I mean, I remember talking about my Hydra damage. My Hydra heads were doing, was it like 400 damage a head or something like, what was it? I was getting to like 1600. So, oh, it's because I had, yeah, 200 damage of four heads. So it was 800 damage. And then I had another four heads because I could summon two Hydras. So I had 1600 damage, non crit. And so my build, if I were critting, let's say like 2 or even 3x of that, DPS or a crit would be doing 3200 to, I guess, 4800, like 2 or 3 times X of the 1600. That doesn't even come close to his 16, 20, or 40k crits. But my Hydras are constantly doing damage, whereas he just has one big boom with upheaval. Now, that was the only bar build you could really do, whereas Sork had multiple builds you could do with Chain Lightning that worked, Hydras worked, Fireball. Um, what other builds were there that were like really strong for Sork? It was mostly just those. Oh, I think Arc Slash at the beginning was really strong. I forget what it was called exactly, but yeah. Um, I'm sure there's other builds that people did as well in Sork that just did fine, but yeah. That's why the Sork was talked about more, because everybody that played Sork, didn't matter what build you really did, it just seemed to do better performance wise than what the average barbarian did, because there was only one build for the barbarian, sadly. And not everybody did that build because the max roll guide was to do whirlwind, and I think uh, they had that information based off of the press release they had done, but they had clearly have adjusted things since the press release. So whirlwind is no longer, or I mean, just isn't as powerful. So gaming with Celeb. Thanks for the follow. Welcome to the stream.
put that in the Diablo 3 category because I think Diablo 3 had much better balancing than Diablo 2 had.
Yep.
The next thing we're going to go over are bosses. Bosses in Diablo 2 were awesome. The first time fighting one, you would probably feel completely overwhelmed, and each of them have their own abilities and really good strengths and even some weaknesses. That after playing them a couple times, you pretty much get the hang of it, and you can take them down with ease. Diablo 3 bosses
Showed
were
Duriel.
actually really good
Challenging.
too. There's some really good boss fights like Belial, the Malthael fight, and they are multi-mechanic fights. You have different phases, you have different stages of the fights, and really what a more modern day ARPG in terms of boss fights would look like. I think bosses in Diablo 3 were pretty well designed. Right now, Diablo 4 feels like the boss fights that we've had are much more involved. They remind me a lot of the Diablo fights, the boss fights in Diablo, even
Back
Path
an
of
issue,
Exile.
yeah.
No, we're not talking about Path of Exile today. But the boss fights that we have had access to in the betas have felt a lot more like a Diablo 3 boss fight as opposed to a Diablo 2 boss fight. And the last category is endgame, including the ultimate endgame of PvP. Now,
Yeah, I mean,
endgame doesn't
I agree
really
with the boss
exist
fights.
in Diablo 2 outside of PvP.
There's nothing really to
Other
say
than
about that.
chaos runs and bell runs, there really isn't a whole lot to do in Diablo 2 endgame. Just recently, we've gotten an update for Terror Zones, but if you haven't played Diablo 2 in a while, you don't even know what those are. There's an Uber fight, but everyone really knows how
No,
to cheese it, and
Jim's
it's not
ear.
very challenging. There's an Uber fight, but
Why
everyone really knows.
me? Rip. Hey, Lucky. Oh, I did have a critique, but had to include that. I mean, I also made it in back in the Diablo 4 thing too, so it's okay. I think it was like around here. So, here. Yeah, see, I made it in. I was on screen. I made it in twice. But um, boss fights, in game PvP, yeah. We'll just skip past me dying again.
How to cheese it, and it's not very challenging content. Diablo 2 endgame.
Appreciate the critiques, kind of a new format for me. Yeah, no problem. Uh, I don't think I go too hard on you. Hey, Redbeard. How's it going, man?
Game outside of PvP. In Diablo 3, the end game are rifts. You do a rift, you do another rift, you get better gear, you make your rift harder, and you do another rift. The entire end game in
Yep,
Diablo 3
that's what I said
is
too.
around keeping the monsters as strong as whatever gear you find. So you really don't have this sense of I'm getting stronger other than your rift number is going up, because as you get stronger, you're really just scaling the enemies to be as strong as you are. In Diablo 2, the end game kind of feels very static, right? The end game in Diablo 2 doesn't change. Not that there is a whole lot, but the stronger you get, the stronger that you feel in the end game.
Hey, it's
Now,
alright.
we
You can't
haven't gotten
speedrun.
our hands on too much endgame in Diablo 4, but we do know that there's going to be a robust PvP system that they are going to try to keep balance and maintain in the game. Now, Diablo 3 didn't have any PvP. Since Diablo 3 really only has one version of endgame, which is Rifts, and we know that there's going to be a lot more to do in endgame in Diablo 4 and PvP included, I would say that this definitely falls more into the Diablo 2 category of endgame, and then finally we can see our results. Diablo 4 is most like Diablo 3 in the combat, in the bosses, and in the game's overall balance, while Diablo 4 most resembles Diablo 2 Resurrected in its itemization, trading, overall atmosphere, end game, including PvP, and the skill tree and item classifications.
Yeah. So, like I said, I disagreed with the skill tree uh, part of it. I think that's under Diablo 3 based on the items combining with your skills. Teo disagreed there too. Yeah. I think it is a pretty good split though of like Diablo 2 and Diablo 3. I think people overlook a lot of things, and that's why like when people kept saying Diablo 3.5, I was really annoyed because there's a lot of stuff to take away from the game that has a lot of Diablo 2 aspects. It's just there's a lot of D3 things that show up or that you first see when looking at Diablo 4, like the skills um, that they took from mostly Diablo 3 skills. And so when you see the skills, that's the first thing you see. Your initial reaction, Diablo 3. Um, and that was just really annoying to like keep hearing over and over again uh, when it was not that for me. So, but it also depends on what you place priority on, right? So, was it hard to categorize that one? Yeah. Well, here's the thing. When you showed Diablo 2 with only a skill tree and no items, you can't do that at all in Diablo 3 or 4 because your item or your weapon damage is everything. And so because of that, everything being based on your weapons or your items, weapons under items, um, then your skill tree becomes secondary to that. Whereas in Diablo 2, your skill tree is everything, and then your items are secondary to your skill tree. Overall opinions coming up. No spoilers. Yeah. Here we go.
And I'm going to leave you here with my parting thoughts on Diablo 4. I really enjoyed playing the beta. There are some things I'd change. I don't like restricting trade at all, but I think I can see where the devs were coming from when they decided to do that.
I did mention this earlier. I don't know. I don't think you mentioned this in your video here about the restricted trading. Is that when you do trade that rare item and that person takes the aspect and puts it on the item becomes off the market, and now another item that's close to that and or similar stats or whatever is now the new item. So that item doesn't lose value to the item that sold, and because there was like multiple on the market, if that makes sense. Except for the demand comes down because obviously like one less person that is looking for that item. But anyway,
I really enjoyed
tries
the
to, yeah.
atmosphere and the whole art style of the game. The bosses fights were fun. The combat was really engaging. I like the combination of the skill tree and gear to get your power and not have it solely be reliant on gear. But I want to know what you guys think again. Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you.
Oh, there's our thoughts. Inarius, oh my gosh, flashbang. So yeah, I watched like a little bit of it and was like, I saw myself in the video, had the comment, and then was like, okay, there's a good video to go over. Just messing. So yeah, good video, Lucky, well done. Yeah, man. I mean, from a Diablo 2 perspective, I I think that pretty much hits all the major points that I was kind of thinking about as well. Um, so yeah, I don't think there's. Is there anything I that you missed? Um, there was one thing. I think like not having maybe rune words, or I mean that's also another itemization thing uh that you could have maybe mentioned. Oh, UI, yeah. Yeah, UI doesn't really bother me. I don't know. Like playing Tetris in Diablo 2 doesn't bother me either though. That like inventory isn't that big of a deal to me, I guess. As long as you have stash space. Like I'm a hoarder. I'll just grab items and go, and I'll take a look at it when I feel like it, I guess. But it doesn't bother me either, to be honest. I don't think it's a major like piece, right? Like the eight things you brought up are major pieces of the ARPG. UI just isn't. It's kind of like a background noise to that. It's and so for people that like have a problem with it, it's just kind of an annoying thing because it's background noise. But like it's not a up in your face and annoying. I guess it is up in your face because it's UI, but uh, but you know what I mean. People have been bugging about having a console based UI that doesn't feel good on PC. Console based UI. Oh, like the UI is made for console and then ported to PC. Hmm. That's interesting. I guess that's kind of a fair assessment, right? Like you have uh, it. It's simplified, so like your armor is the same size as a chip gem, which doesn't make sense because a chip gem fits inside an armor. Um, or I guess they're crude gems, and then they can be upgraded chip gems. But yeah, most games are optimized for consoles, and yeah, like that's the thing. Like half the player base is going to be playing on console, so you have to do something for console. But I guess it depends. Like, do you make it slightly annoying for PC users to be using something that makes it much better for console, or do you make it annoying for like a bad experience for console users because they have to play Tetris, which takes forever on console? Um, like people playing on D2R on console, dude, I just can't get around the fact that people play controller for D2. It, it's mind blowing to me. I understand that some people have like disabilities and they can't play keyboard and mouse, or that you know whatever. Like it's just I can't. Other than that, like I can't see why people would play controller over keyboard and mouse. It's crazy to me. I love playing D2R on Switch when I'm not at my PC. Huh. Interesting. But not every class works well. Okay, that's fair. I guess, yeah, you could have some classes that only need like two abilities, a right click and a left click, and then you're good. um, so, but once you have characters that need like eight abilities to be able to, you know, utilize everything, like a necromancer, like a bone spear necromancer that uses like bone prison, amp damage, corpse explosion, bone spear, bone spirit for single target, uh, golem for tanking or whatnot. Um, what else? Teleport. Uh, am I missing? I mean, multiple kinds of curses. It doesn't have to be just amp for. It can be low res as well. Uh, what else? Like Necro can go hard, man. I don't think you can't play Necro at the highest level that you could, like a Sork for a console versus a PC. Bow, yeah, bow on swap. God. So you have to swap bow and battle command. Oh my gosh, that sounds just so painful. Jeez. Like I'm afraid 2 years down the line, if they don't stop this account bound BS, it's going to be Diablo 3 all over again. Uh, I don't think so. Nope. I think rare items that you find that'll be powerful, more powerful than legendary items that you find. You just take the legendary item, you break the aspect down, and now you have this powerful rare item that you can put an aspect on, or you can sell that rare item, that powerful rare item, for I guess gold is going to be the currency. Um, so you trade that item for gold, and then you can go upgrade your current gear, I guess, because that requires a lot of gold. Um, and you just collect a bunch of gold, and buy yourself a better item as well.